The following is an introductory video that we have prepared with a reflective monologue written in particular for this talk. It has been called the Seeming Limits Hypothesis, and the video is adapted from the original Cosmic Eye by astrophysicist Daniel Obrisco. Once in time, humans began to explore the universe on scales greater than its size. They started to observe from their own body to their immediate environment. Their built environment as its constructions, houses, restaurants, and the natural environment they are embedded in. Then, going through the scales of its parcels and blocks, the land, and continuing with the neighborhoods, the villas, and the communes to arrive at the largest scale of the built environment perceptible up to now, the cities and the metropolis that are located in landscapes, constituting states. When looking at countries as groups of states located in territories, humans began to organize them into geographical categories such as regions and later continents. It was then when humans believed that the center of the universe was the planet Earth, the biosphere, and its limits were the orbits of its satellites, like the moon, geocentrism. But then they realized that there were other planets, and that the biosphere was part of a bigger system with a star in its center, the solar system, and its outer orbits became the new limits of the universe. That was known as heliocentrism. Until then, humans had these two ethics, heliocentrism and geocentrism, both seen through an egocentric worldview known as anthropocentrism. The humans were the center of every perspective. And just in those times, humans discovered there were other neighboring stars like the Sun, and thus other solar and planetary systems like theirs. These systems were in turn located into interstellar clouds known as local bubbles, which were part of a global system called galaxy, the Milky Way, the new limit of the universe by then. But once again, the universe gave another lesson to the stubborn human who reduced the limits of reality to the ones of its knowledge. The Milky Way was in a neighborhood of galaxies, even larger, like Andromeda, and these galaxies are part of local groups known as superclusters, now components of a global system that includes everything, the cosmic web, the uniform known universe, until now. The questions here and now are: is the universe actually boundless and limitless? What is after the greatest universal limit? Nothing? If the universe is supposed to end there can be nothing. If so, what is nothingness? It must be something, but an unknown something. And it is here that we can narrate the other history, a kind of parallel to this one, both in space and time. So, in turn, humans looked inside and they began to explore the universe on scales smaller than their own. They started to observe the parts of the body and of the matter, and its observant eye, a subject, became an object of observation. They realized that their body was also made up of organs, and these, in turn, were made up of tissues, cells, and molecules. It was known that the cell, the fundamental unit of life, contains genetic material in structures called chromosomes, and these DNA strands were made up of groups of atoms called molecules. And finally, these atoms were the fundamental unit of matter having no parts, the universal limit of the smallest, atomism. But once again, the universe gave another lesson to the stubborn human who reduced the limits of reality to those of its knowledge. The atom, as it was known for more than 2,000 years, also has particles. In the words of Niels Bohr, the atom is a small solar system with a nucleus in the center and electrons moving around the nucleus in well-defined orbits. And these particles, besides the electrons, also include the protons and neutrons in its nucleus. getting to the quarks and neutrinos, the smallest known particles of reality until now. The questions here and now are: is the universe actually composed of elementary particles that contain nothing? But what is nothingness? Everything? It all started when the humans began to look outside and look inside, and continued when they began to inquire into the largest and the smallest. And then they realized that the immensity was in turn the smallest, and the smallness was in turn the greatest. And they understood that everything was relative, even their own existence, even space and time across all its scales and levels. As you can see, the orders of reality and the scales of the universe can start from the very smallest particles as the quarks, but also goes to the biggest phenomena we have discovered in this universe, the cosmic web. But at last, the size and the time length ceased to be rigid and static notions to become relative notions. Since then, in the past, as it was inside Atman, so it was outside Brahman. Now, in the present, as it is inside, so it is outside. And after, in the future, as it will be inside, so it will be outside. As Albert Einstein have stated 2 weeks before his death, the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. All that there is the present. Time, it is an illusion to make sense of our presence in a vast spatio-temporal ocean, the universe. The spatio-temporal notions of reality were now relative, dynamic, and dependent on the observer level. The cosmic web ends up being the synapses of a brain like ours, a network pattern present in all the levels of reality. That is the history. And that is the history we want to tell today. The network connecting us with other living beings and shows that our built environment is part of a bigger natural environment, the web of life. And one of those networks is the habitat. And that's why we are here today. Hi everyone, my name is Daniel Marin Vanegas, and I will be presenting Deep Human Ecology. Habitat as a network bridging natural ecosystems of the environment and artificial technosystems of the built environment. This is the digital and recorded version of the talk I have presented in person in Hawaii for the 13th International Conference of the Constructed Environment. But first of all, I wanted to show you that it's not for a random reason I am wearing this shirt for the talk. As we have seen in the video, the cosmos is within us. And as Carl Sagan have said, we are made of star stuff and we are a way for the universe to know itself. So this is the presentation structure that will be divided into 3 sections. Each one of these sections is related to a classical category of knowledge. The first one, contextualization, is related to knowing what we are talking about and what problem we are facing. That is to say, we will be talking about time in space, two chronologies that tell us one history, a complex problem, the failed dichotomy between nature and culture, and the path of the notions of habitat and built or constructed environment. Then, for the second section, conceptualization, related to knowing why this is a problem, we will be talking about space in time, scales, levels, and orders. That is to say, the scientific problem of the scale. And also we will be presenting our framework, Deep Human Ecology and its 3 main headings. For the last and third section, implementation related to knowing how to deal with this problem, we will talk about levels of organization of both the natural and artificial environment with its ecosystems and its technosystems respectively. And this is related to talk about a joint term that is space-time and to talk about our multi-scalar model. At last, we get to the outcomes and conclusions and the impacts of the model, and that the main conclusion we will be heading is to design for the community, nature, culture, two sides of the same coin. To contextualize the problem, it is necessary to talk about nature and culture as a false dichotomy, an historical complex problem we have been experiencing in human cultures with a high degree of urban and technological development, facing a connectivity crisis with the very nature that provides our ecosystems services, threatening our sustainability in different spatial and temporal scales. So, since the birth of our civilization, we have been separating different couples of terms and phenomena. For instance, nature and culture as the dichotomy related with the scientific problem of subject and object. But also, we have divided biology and cognition with the problem of mind and body. And at last, we also separated ecology and technology as in flesh and stone. So we have been considering these terms as diverging realities. But throughout more than 2000 years, we have learned that there are different types of nature, non-human nature and human nature. But all of them nature at all. We have learned that cognition is in all levels of life, even in bacteria. Their cognition is in all the kingdoms of nature, Monera, protists, plants, fungi, and animals, including human animals. And ecology and technology are both nature. We have learned that we study ecosystems for ecology, and we will be studying techno-ecosystems for technology, as we will be explaining in the next slides. So these are different but converging realities. And this work is a claim that allow us to think about the conservation of architectural heritage as well as natural heritage from human ecology, which leaves behind the dichotomies between nature and culture, instinct and intelligence, natural and artificial, and with this, joining an acknowledged paradigm that leaves behind the historical separations between natural sciences and human sciences, between biology and technology, flesh and stones, and so on. Thus, transcending disciplinary boundaries and understanding the human, its culture, and its habitat as part of the nature that it is and has always been. So, for the second chronology that complete us this history about time in space for our problem, it's necessary to talk about the notions of habitat and constructed environment. For this, we have prepared a twofold timeline, habitat versus human dwelling. At the very beginning, the term of niche was coined in ecology as the place where an organism lives. Ecologists such as Grinnell and Leopold have worked on these terms, and this was the first approach to the notion of ecological habitat. But in the meantime, since the middle of the 14th century, the concept or notion of human dwelling has been coined as a place of residence, habitation, and abode. But then, in the middle of the last century, the concept of environmental habitat has been coined by ecologists Eugene Odum and Gary Barrett as a concept related to the biological community, and it was defined as the place of appropriate conditions for an organism, species, or animal or plant community to live. Other ecologists such as Leopold and Dobenmar has also worked on this term. In the meantime, the concept of human dwelling have evolved as decent and adequate housing or adequate dwelling in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. But then both of these timelines become to to be more complex, and these concepts started to evolve even more. We in the 1980s started to talk about the multidimensional habitat, which includes not only the physical space that the organism occupies, but also its functional roles and different gradients such as pH, temperature, and humidity. But in the other parallel history, we started to talk about landscape architecture and urbanism in housing, and we started to talk about environmental design. So we are not more talking about houses or only human dwellings, but the immediate environment. At last, since the 1966 and towards today, the academic community started to talk about the concept of built or constructed environment that is considered as an interdiscipline. And since the first conference for human habitat organized by United Nations Human Settlement Program, Habitat 1, we started to talk about the human habitat, the concept of ecology applied to human settlements. So as you can see here in this twofold timeline, these, these phenomena have been studied as different approaches, as different realities, but at last we are converging that all environments are part of nature, uh, neglecting if they are built environments or non-built environments. We head to the second section, conceptualization. And for this, we will be talking about the concept of orders of magnitude that has been brought from the field of physics, astrophysics. And this was brought to tackle a scientific problem that is the problem of the scale. And for tackling this problem, we also want to answer these questions. Where are we situated? What is our space and time in these orders of reality that we have seen in the video, as you can see in the both sides of this slide? With the reflective monologue I have written for this video. I mean, what is the human scale? But also, we want to answer where is our built environment? Our environment spatio-temporal location. That is, scale ranges for our built world in a complex universe. So for answering these questions, we wrote this framework. The orders of magnitude of nature or reality can be seen from different terms. In spatial terms, with space measured in meters, in temporal terms, with time measured in seconds, and in mass terms, with mass measured with kilograms or pounds or whatever. So you can see here how we situated the human scale is in these different terms: space, time, and mass. And we can see how a human average lifetime is longer than a day or than a heartbeat, but is shorter than geological processes. We can also see how human spatial scale is bigger than a cell scale, but is smaller than landscape scales. Also, we have here in mass how humans are heavier than ants, but they are lighter than buildings. So for the second question, we have inquired for the scales in these terms of the built environment, and we have found that the smallest things built by humans are developed by nanotechnology that are in a scale of 10 to the power of minus 9. But the biggest things we have built are metropolises considered as sets of buildings situated in landscapes, as in the video. And metropolises are in a scale of 10 to the power of 4. And in time terms, these are the scale ranges for our built environment where objects designed by humans have a time length of 1 day, but urban processes even get closer to the 10 to the power of 10 scale. That means centuries and millennials or millenniums are the time scale for urban processes. And in mass terms, we have found that silica aerogel is the layer thing we have developed or constructed as humans. And the buildings are the heaviest things. I have also brought a reference that is the International Spatial Station as one of the heaviest things or systems developed or built by humans. So here we have the human scale and its built environment scale, anthropic orders of magnitude. For closing this second section, I want to present our framework, Deep Human Ecology and its three main ethics. I want you to be aware that this is a matter of perspective. I mean, the relativity and dependence on different spatio-temporal contexts allow us to think and to feel in a specific point of view or worldview that is consolidated in an ethic. And so this is an issue of recognizing different points of view related with this context. In these terms, deep human ecology try to get join different ethics of points of view that we have used throughout our civilization history or humanity history. As we have seen in the video, we have experienced geocentrism and then anthropocentrism. We saw as ourselves as the center of the universe. So ecocentrism is an ethic that cares for nature in general, for environmental systems, even excluding human beings from this nature. Then anthropocentrism cares for culture, for human social systems specifically. And then we propose to add the biocentrism as a new ethic that cares for both social systems in general and human social systems specifically. So biocentrism allow us to get join ecocentrism that cares for nature in general, excluding humans, and anthropocentrism. And we make a question, made a question that is, what happened if we situate ourselves in an ethic based on cosmocentrism? That is, there is no center, there is no importance of any point of view. But we realize that this becomes nihilism. Nihilism. So the best option here is to care for life in its broadest sense. So what we advocate for? We advocate for life in its broadest sense as a phenomena that allow us to support the reconciliation, the engagement between ecology and technology, between non-human nature and human nature, that recognize all these types of nature as part of the same system, the life in universe. So these ethics are not in conflict but complementary. One might wonder, why biocentric ethics for a deep human ecology? This is because life encompasses both societies of non-human and human living beings. We have brought a graphic summary for conveying this relationship in terms of the different scales and levels of the systems. So first we have nature as the higher level system encompassing environmental systems. There, life emerges, the biological systems or living systems. In between the living systems, we have the social systems, also called socio-ecological or socio-environmental systems. So here we have a comparison on the different names that academic communities have given to this phenomena. Then, in the social systems, culture emerges. That is, the human social systems, also called here techno-systems or techno-ecosystems. And these are the foundations of our built environment and social environment. I have brought an excerpt from the Capra course adapted for this talk, and it says that the ecological systems, ecosystems, and the human social systems, cultural systems, or techno-systems, are connected to the living systems, biosystems. And this is why biocentrism encompasses all of these phenomena and ethics. Having understood what was stated in this talk, we can identify why the notion of nature's ecosystem services comes from the anthropocentric paradigm and ethics that understands humans and their built environment as something artificial interpreted as unnatural. This notion was developed from ecological economics by Gretchen Daly, and it was popularized by her professors, and it started to be used by several institutions since then to convey that nature provides humans with services, excluding ourselves of that nature. We head to the third and last section, implementation, where it is intended to show the practical usefulness of this theory and methodology. First, we will talk about the natural quote unquote environment and its levels of organization. Ecologists Eugene Odum and Gary Barrett have organized the knowledge ecosystem in relationship with the natural sciences and environmental sciences in general. They organized them in a cycle, and it started here in the 1850s, the Industrial Revolution, with the constitution of natural sciences such as geology, physics, mathematics, chemistry, and biology. Then, biology started to specialize and divide into specializations and subdisciplines such as microbiology, zoology, and botany. Biology started to evolve, and then emerged the biological sciences with a lot of sub-specializations of this field of knowledge. There, the specialization of ecology as a branch of biological sciences emerged. Ecology started to evolve in the last years of the last century to constitute the ecological sciences, a more complex and knowledge branch encompassing a lot of problems, social environmental problems, such as toxicology, ecosystem health, human health, urban ecology, landscape ecology, and so on. So in the last years, at the beginning of this century, these ecologies propose an integrative sciences that encompasses all these socio-environmental problems and socio-ecological problems to be addressed by integrative sciences, such as sustainability and global planning, resource management, synthesis and integration sciences, and problem solving to be able to close this cycle
for it to be sustainable, they proposed the phenomena of levels of organization, both in temporal scales and spatial scales. So closing the circle of knowledge and understanding is the phenomena and concept of levels of organization. And here it is. Here we have the different orders of natural environment here in our planet Earth, starting from the cell and ending with the ecosphere or the Earth itself, passing through the organisms and a lot of other systems levels that we have here in the Earth. So here we can see how these orders of reality that are different ranges for these orders of magnitude that we have seen in the video in the planet Earth, starting from the atoms, passing through the organism, and going through the global system we have here, the ecosphere or the biosphere. So we have learned that these orders of reality are the limits for our natural environment in our global habitat. In this way, we can move forward to our reflection, the artificial environment and its levels of organization. Artificial, supposedly, because we have learned that our built environment is also part of nature as ourselves, and artificial was part of a false dichotomy that we have transcended with this worldview. So the scales of the natural environment are different levels of ecological systems, so-called ecosystems. And the concept of natural environment was coined by the ecologists in the 1920s. So from top to down, we can see different levels that we have seen in the previous slide. The ecosphere, the planet Earth, the biomes such as the tropics and the deserts, the landscapes, such as islands, uh, also a valley or a bay, the ecosystems, so like the forest, the rainforest, the biological community, that is the cohabitation of different species in an ecosystem, the population, that is the same species cohabiting or in cohabitation in a same place, and the organism. So we made a question. If ecologists can study ecosystems, ecological system, why we cannot study technological systems that we have called techno-systems? In this way, we managed to propose the scales of the built environment. As in a bottom-up fashion, we made an analogy uh, of each one of these levels. So analogy to organism, there are the objects designed by humans or constructed by humans. Then we have the housing, where the family lives, the households, as analogy to the population. I mean, in the housing is where the human species can be found uniquely. Then we have the neighborhood as analogic to the biological community. Then the cities and towns as the ecosystems. The landscapes analogic to the concept of regions and states. And the countries and mostly territory analogy to the concept of biome. At last, we have the concept of the technosphere that we have learned from planetary sciences and planetary studies fields, where they consider the technosphere as the set of the built systems of human species. So we also made a question: where is the habitat here? So we started and realized that ecologists study the habitat of non-human animals in between the scales of the biological community and the population. So in this way, we managed to to situate the scale of the habitat, of the human habitat, but mostly habitat in general, because since the habitat is in the level of the biological community, it means our cohabitation with other species in a same ecosystem. So habitat cannot be individualized, and this way, this it is a network that connect our environment to the rest of the natural environment. In this way, we have located the spatial scale of the habitat, be it ecological or human, sometimes called socio-ecological. Now, let's move on to its temporal delimitation to determine its temporal scale. Here we have the temporal scales of the built environment that we have adapted from the time rings or organized by Moffat and Kohler. So for objects, we have a time frame or time scale of days. For families and buildings, we have a time frame of years. For communities and neighborhoods of decades. And as we have seen in previous slides, urban processes suffer changes in terms of centuries. They are long-term phenomena. And at last, the territory have changes in time frames of millenniums. Even the largest scale of our built environment have a lot of changes, but in different temporal scales. This way, we manage to get joined the concepts of space and time for our built environment to talk about a mixed concept of space-time. Up to now, we are now able to talk about the outcomes and impacts of this model for the design of the environment, be it natural or built, also called a second nature, a built one. We have developed a multi-scalar model for the scales of the constructed environment based on the international standards for architectonical projects representation, graphic representation. Specifically, Colombian national standard from the official institution that regulates architectonical professions have, has these scales, but they don't include the habitat scale. With this model, we were able to include this habitat scale in between the housing scale and the neighborhood or urban scales. And this is not an absolute truth. Rather than establishing a rigid scale, this proposal shows a scale range with limits in between the habitats can be found. In this way, habitats can be found from 1 to 250 and 1 to 1000 scales. And what matters, what I want to convey to you all is what matters is to understand that whatever the scale at which we are designing a system, we must take into account its relationship with its lower order scales, components or subsystems, and its relationship with its higher order systems or suprasystems. Our concluding remarks relies on this statement. To design for the community, nature, culture. This way, transcending the historical dichotomy we have been experiencing since the cradle of our civilization. I also have brought this question from the Capra course for our awareness. What communities do we belong to? After Capra, we all belong to two communities, the humanity, that is the culture, and the planet Earth, that can be considered as the global habitat. As Aldo Leopold Ecologies has also stated, simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include not only humans, but also soils, waters, plants, and animals, or what Leopold called the land. This way, I wanted to convey this conclusion to you all. We can understand and study the human habitat from the field of the constructed environment, just as biologists study the habitat of other living beings. We are studying an environment, a built one, but still an environment. The constructed environment is still a natural environment. That's all. We use systemic thinking to develop a new field of study, the techno-systemic studies. And for this closing, I wrote a famous statement that has been widely used since the emergence of the systems theory and systems thinking, and is the whole is more than the sum of its parts. This statement is actually from the classical Greeks as Aristotle, but we want to propose a modification to this historical statement with this new worldview and ethics, and is the whole is more than the sum of its parts, but the parts are not less than the whole. We are not less than the universe, but the universe and the rest of the nature are not less than us. Thank you. Here you can check the references for section 1, here for section 2 and 3, and here you have the rest of the references. Thank you so much for listening to me towards here. And here I let you the QR for scanning and checking our publications on the topic. Bye.